I've made a ton of mascot horror games, Minced, Gingerdead, Propeller Pete, and plenty of others. But I get asked all the time, Goose, how do I make a mascot horror game myself? And I've put off making a tutorial forever. But today, I'm going to show you exactly how you can make your own mascot horror game so you can, I don't know, laugh at how stupid the characters are. But before we get into that, I'd like to thank today's sponsor, Milanote, which is the perfect tool for organizing your creative projects. All right, so here we are in Milanote, and I'm going to walk you through how I use it to organize the development of mascot horror games. So up at the top here, we have 4 different rows laying out 4 different pillars of mascot horror. So for starters, we have environment, and right here I've listed a to-do list, simple environment, abandoned building, and why it was abandoned. And then of course I linked down here a pack for the factory that we're gonna add in the horror game. And of course, post-processing, just more to-do list stuff, super simple, super easy. Now the next pillar would be the mascot. So of course, here's a to-do list, finish the proof of concept, create the assets, yada yada, all this stuff, super easy. And then down here, I've put some other successful games just as inspiration for what you kind of want in a mascot. And of course, childlike wonder, but twisted would be the main theme we're going off of here. And that kind of ties into the story, but we'll get more onto that one later. Anyways, in the mascot, I've created a separate board for conceptualizing. And this is of course where we'll start doing some conceptualizing for the actual mascot himself. I don't want to get too much into this, but you know, here's that. One thing I especially like about Milanote is that you can look up your own images here that you can add as references. So for example, if I wanted to add some horror themes just for some conceptualization work, they have a whole library of things to add, which makes it super easy for you to figure out exactly the kind of theme you're going for in the game. So for example, we could use this and then just put it wherever we want. So yeah, honestly, super simple stuff. Laid out a ton of pictures and it's just great to use as a board for some ideas. But anyways, back to here, we can continue with the story where I kind of added this little table and I figured this would be kind of useful so that you know the aspect, trend, and example for each of these in the game. An aspect, for example, would be setting isolation, where you would have a remote or confined location that the player would be in. So for example, an abandoned forest, a factory, I don't know, stuff like that. Now, as for our final board gameplay, I just added 2 of these to-do lists for player mechanics and AI mechanics respectively, and then linked a ton of helpful tutorials that I'll probably be needing a little into the video. Milanote is honestly the perfect tool to use for this kind of project because it's super simple to figure everything out. Finally, Milanote is available for free with no time limit, so sign up for a free Milanote account using the link in the description. Okay, now that we have all that laid out, it's time to actually get working. So to get started, first open up your game engine of choice. I personally use Unreal for my mascot games, but there are tons of other great ones to choose from. Once you've decided, you can create your first project. If you have absolutely no clue how to use a game engine, there are tons of free tutorials to watch, and I'll make sure to link a few good ones for you below. Anyways, after you create your project, you can start importing the assets that you want to use to design your environment. You can hand make these in your 3D engine of choice, but if you're lazy like me, there are literally tons of assets that you can find online. Anyways, after you get the assets, you can begin to lay out the environment exactly how you like it. This is honestly my favorite part of the whole game making process because you can literally put things wherever you want. You have entire creative control to make the game as realistic or as cartoonish as you want it to be, which is honestly pretty awesome. Once all that is laid out though, we're going to want to start thinking about our mascot for the game. Don't worry though, we will come back to the level later. Anyways, for the mascot, you can design anything you want, but since it's a mascot game, it's best to abide by the unofficial rules of the mascot horror genre, which means your monster should be an anthropomorphized version of a common item, like a toy, stuffed animal, or even a slice of meat. For this tutorial, however, I'm going to be going with a stuffed bear named Barnaby. If you're struggling trying to think of a name for your mascot, don't worry, because all you really need to do is find a name that starts with the first letter of the object that your mascot portrays. Mason Milk, Jordan Jellyfish, or Chase Chopper are all good examples of this. Anyways, once you have the item and name down, it's time to make a backstory for your mascot game. If you've made it this far, you probably have a pretty good idea of what you want the story to look like. I mean, we already have the environment and mascot down, so logically that's what's next. Now this is honestly what separates a super good high quality mascot game from the goofy odd games that I make, because there are some people out there that have amazing ideas for games and tons of talented story writers and visualizers. Basically, you can make whatever story you like, but most games revolve around the same basic premise and the same basic trope. Giant underground facility, workplace disaster, missing kids, you know the stuff. You can pretty much go wild here, and honestly, I'm pretty interested to hear what your crazy ideas for mascot games are, so make sure to write them in the comments below. For my tutorial game, however, I'm not going to put a ton of thought into it. I decided that the story of my game should be about Barnaby, the beloved mascot of the Stitch Factory, a toy company renowned for its hand-stitched bears. But as the factory expanded, workers began noticing strange malfunctions with the bears. Then a tragedy struck with an electrical fire that consumed part of the building, forcing the factory to shut down. Yada yada, Barnaby wants to chase people down for revenge. Yeah, it's pretty basic. But for the sake of the tutorial, that's all it needs to be. Anyways, now we can get to work on the modeling. Now, me personally, I like when things are free to use, and that's why I do all my modeling in Blender, which is awesome software that I am still trying to learn. But for a basic monster, it's pretty easy to do. I know a lot of Blender experts are probably cringing at the poly count of my models, but do bear in mind, pun intended, that I'm pretty much a Blender noob. Anyways, now that you have the model done, it's time to make animations for it. You'll most likely need a walking, running, and catch/jump scare animation. And luckily, all of these can be made pretty easily. Typically, if I'm in a time crunch or if I'm doing a game for a video, I'll just use Adobe Mixamo to rig and animate my models. But if you're serious about making a super high quality mascot game, it's honestly best to create some custom animations in Blender, or whatever software you're working in. They'll honestly look way better. But now that we have animations, we can open the game engine and actually start working on the project. You can make the starting area for your player and begin to add some substance to the level that you already created. Decide where you want the mascot, where you want puzzles, and where you want to put the ending. You can then get started on the actual scripting for the game. Unreal Blueprint is really fun for me because my brain does not like looking at script editors, and I'm honestly pretty used to a node-based workflow. Anyhow, with that aside, here's what I have so far. It's a massive factory where you start on the outside and have to find a key to get in. It's super dark and you only have the flashlight, so it starts to build some tension. Remember that the player still has no clue where the monster is on their first playthrough, so there is plenty of time to build tension. Once they get into the building or whatever the next level is, that's where you can start to amp things up. Audio plays a big part in horror games, so make sure you find something suitable. Freesound.org has lots of good free ambient noises, so I would definitely recommend that. You should also make a ton of workplace safety posters with mascot themes to add some cheap lore to the game. But anyways, after you have the layout and mascot, it's time to make a mechanic. In most mascot games, the main mechanic is just walking, but if you really want to make a fun game, it's best to have an interesting, or at least a different mechanic. The best way to do this is to make it work with the story, so choose wisely. Since this is a short tutorial though, and because there are a million different creative mechanics that you can add, I'm not going to add anything too crazy to my game. We can just add some of these colorful pads and hide the matching blocks around the map. Mascot horror puzzles can really be as simple or as intricate as you like. There honestly aren't any rules. Just remember that people will probably rage quit your game if they can't figure it out. Anyhow, now it's time to add the actual monster to your game, and here's what Barnaby looks like after he's been added. I'm just gonna have him patrol this main area where the colorful pads are, and his main goal will be to protect you from solving the puzzle. But just know that if he catches you, it's game over. If you want to make an actual high-quality mascot game, I'd honestly recommend that you do not follow what I do, because for the most part, the mascots in my game just chase you around. For an actual good mascot, there needs to be a little more depth. You can stage a special vent chase sequence, have the monster spawn in different areas, or have multiple monsters do different things each time. It's really all up to you. As long as it fits with the story, it's all good. Now though, it's time to add an ending to your game. Obviously, one of the endings happens after the mascot catches you, but for the actual game ending, you can just wrap it up however you like. If the game is truly a one-off, you should probably write an ending. But if you really want it to be an authentic mascot game, you need one thing and one thing only. 20 different chapters all laid out in a completely illogical sequence with no overarching story to connect them, aside from minimal, easily digestible storytelling that feels more like... Or you can just never finish the game.